Hello, what's up, everybody? How is it going? Welcome to another tutorial series, and this time we'll be starting our new playlist and we'll be learning about MVC framework, and especially we'll be covering Codeigniter framework in this tutorial series. I know there are lots of other famous frameworks in the market right now, but I thought it would be best for us to start with Codeigniter because it is the basic most framework and one of the oldest MVC framework used in the market, and this is the place where we really have to code. And I think this will be a good way for us to understand the patterns of MVC. So in the current MVC frameworks available in the market, they are really good, and they have really minimized the writing of codes by really good functions. But in order to have a core concept of MVC, I think Codeigniter will be the good one to start with. And of course, we'll be also covering other frameworks in future. But I want to make a playlist of Codeigniter so that those who are really starting with PHP and struggling to work out with PHP, I've prepared a PHP specials playlist just before this, and you can go through them. And after you have some basic concept of PHP, then it's a really good time to start with Codeigniter. And once we are done with Codeigniter, we'll be shifting to other frameworks, and maybe we can also cover some JavaScript frameworks like Vue.js, and we can also cover some core concept of CSS and maybe other stuffs related to web development. And we will also be dealing with MVC, but for now, I mean Laravel, but for now we'll be covering Codeigniter in few videos. And in order to understand MVC, I just want to give a brief background that what is MVC. But before starting with MVC, I want to remind you about three-tier architecture, which we discussed in my very first video of this channel, the three-tier architecture. The three-tier architecture, if you don't remember, is the architecture in which the entire software or web application or mobile application or any kind of software is built on. So whenever we browse any kind of let's say web page, even this is a web page, right? So in any web page we can see some images, some texts, some links, some tables, some forms, some images. Everything that we can see basically is known as client tier, because these are the things that can be that are visible in client's machine. The only thing that is visible in browser or any web or any, let's say, window, anything that can be viewed is known as client application, because that is the thing that is being displayed in client's computer. By saying client, we mean the user or the visitor of the website who is actually viewing the website. So anything that is viewable is known as client tier. Similarly, application tier is that level of or that layer of the application which is not visible, and it actually is denoted by the logic. So for example, this is the web page that lists out all the folders in my amps www. So these are the folders that I've created inside my amps www. So once I click on any of the link, something happens in the background, and after that it lists out the page, right? Something happens in the background and it does some operation, and again it comes back to the client application. So a new page is being shown, and this is like, let's say, a new client application that is being displayed in client machine. But something happened before displaying this and before clicking on this, and that logical part that is not being seen is known as logical tier. A practical example for this could be a login form. We must have been using Facebook, right? So whenever we type facebook.com in a new computer, it asks for a login username and password, right? So once we the form that is being displayed in the home page of or the login page of Facebook, that form is client application. Now once we put in our username and our password and hit login button, something happens in the background. What it does, it validates our username and password and checks to see if the combination of username and password is correct, right? So that logical part, that validation part, that happens in background, that we cannot see, right? But we know that after we hit our username and password correct and hit the submit button, it will take me to my dashboard or my wall, right? So that wall is again a client application, but the let's say the transition part of between login and my wall, something happens in between them, and that is like validation part. So that part is logical tire. So this tire, application tire, is actually dealing with the logics and that is tied up with client tire strictly. Now, at the same time, the application tire also communicates with the database. For example, if we hit our username, if we type in our username and password and hit submit button, it will check if the combination of that username and password exists in the database where we have stored all the usernames and passwords, right? So if it finds that username and password inside our database, then it returns to the database returns to our logical tire and says that the username and password that the client typed is correct and I found it. So application receives that acknowledgement and displays a new client application to the client machine or displays something that is relevant, right? So these three tier communicates with each other. So whatever we display in the client machine is client tier. So application tier is responsible for background logic, and in order to perform background logic, it receives the data from the client tier and it also receives the data from database tier. It sometimes might receive the data and store it to database, or it might sometimes receive the data from client application, validate from database, or it might also, for example, in a news website, what we do, we fetch the data from the database and display it in the client's computer. So in this case, we are grabbing the data from the database and displaying it in the client machine. So application tier serves as middleware for client and database. So it grabs data from the client, processes it, saves the database, and also sometimes grabs the data from the database, processes it, and serves it in the client tier. So this is the simple architecture on which each and every application, software, mobile application, web application, everything is dependent on. Okay. Now, in order to manage the code, what MVC pattern does is it assigns a separate type of block for each and every tire. So anything that is being viewed in client computer, the view, this module in MVC, view is responsible to display any kind of information in client tire. So this block. So in MVC, let's say frameworks, the view block is responsible to display anything in client's application. So anything that is being displayed is because of the view. Okay. So controller now serves for the application tire. So all the logical part, let's say communicating with client tire and communicating with database tire as a middleware, and that role is being performed by the controller. So database tire again is represented by model. So all the connection tasks or executing queries, or let's say grabbing the data from the database or inserting into database, so anything that is related to database tire is performed by the model. So model directly communicates with database and passes the response of database to the controller. Controller performs the logic, processes the data, and displays it in the view. So each of these tier is in MVC pattern. Each of these tier is represented by a separate block. So view is responsible for client tier. Application tier is handled by the controller, and the model is responsible for all the database tasks that is being let's say executed in the system. So by dividing these three blocks, Now our code is well managed. So all the let's say logical part is in one place, all the client application is another place, and all the database execution part is in some another block. So in this way, MVC pattern have like let's say divided a project or an application into different blocks of codes, and each code is responsible for various their own set of tasks. So after this brief background on MVC and Tutor architecture, I think it's now time for us to set up a quick project in Codeigniter. Today will be just I'll just guide you the basic things of Codeigniter, its structure, how to download it, how to set up it. So let us begin by going to Codeigniter. Okay, so codeigniter.com. If you go to codeigniter.com, it will give you this basic page. You can just click on download, check to see which is the most stable version. So you can see, and the stable version currently is Codeigniter 3.x. Okay, so version 3 is going on right now, which is stable. You can see that we also have Codeigniter version 4, but it is coming up, so it is not stable. It is maybe in phase 1, as it's saying it is in development phase. So we are not interested in downloading 4.x. Let us just download the most stable version, that is Codeigniter 3.x. I'm not sure which version exactly the Codeigniter is providing in 3.x, but let's just download this. So I would just like to click on download Codeigniter 3. So just download this. You will get a zip file. I've already downloaded it, so I will not download it again. So you can just save it. Okay, let's just download it. I'm downloading Codeigniter. You can also download it. 5 seconds, 4 seconds, and we are almost done. Let's see. I've downloaded the Codeigniter. It is here. Now I'll just grab the. So after extracting, you will get this folder. If you go and get inside the folder, you will see all the files. So let us just copy this folder and place it inside our root folder, that is our web servers www. So in my case, it is application, amps, and www. Paste it. So now here I have Codeigniter 3.1.8. So once you have pasted it inside your www, just rename the folder to, let's say we can just name it CI. Okay, so this is my folder, and I would also like to cut this and paste it inside my, let's say let us just make a new series for CI. I'll set up a new GitHub for this and push it over there so that you can use it. Okay, so CI. Now I'd like to grab this inside my Sublime text. So let me just open this, grab CI, and we have CI. Now before getting started with CI, I would just like you to try to run the project that we just created. So localhost /CI, not CI tips, just CI, and you can see that we have a basic page already set up. So this is the home page, and we'll discuss about how this is here, why this is here, and everything. And let us just go through the structure of Codeigniter before we get started with this. So if you see, there are some folders here, and the thing that we are interested on is application folder. The system folder consists of the core files of Codeigniter that we don't want to mess with. So let's just minimize it for now. User guide is actually a useful module, but we have the user guide already online. So you can go to documentation and read the user guide online for Codeigniter 3.x, and we have all the user guides over here. It is exactly the same thing. So we don't need the user guide in our folder to make our folder size quite big. So let us just remove this user guide from our folder. I just deleted it. It's gone. So this is my Codeigniter now. So the thing that we need to discuss inside Codeigniter is the application folder, and as I told, the system folder is the core files that was built by the CI developers. So we don't want to mess with these folders. Just minimize this. We don't have to worry about this folder. But what I really want to discuss in CI, I want to discuss the application folder. And for now, there are lots and lots of folders here. You can see the cache folder, config folder, controllers, core, helpers, libraries, models, third-party views, and we'll discuss about these folders shortly. But before starting with Codeigniter, you must know that there is a folder config where we generally set up something before we start with working with the project, right? So the basic most thing that I want you to start working with is the config file, and we'll also be discussing about routes and database and auto load. These are some of the files that we really need to understand. But let me start with config.php. So config.php is generally a file where we set up our some values that is associated with the project configuration, like the base URL of the project. So this is something that I want you to understand right now. So base URL is actually a URL that we generally use to browse our website. For example, let's say I want to, this is the URL that we just browsed. So you can see localhost/ci. After we type localhost/ci, it opened this basic welcome page. So if I just copy this and paste this here, this is my base URL. So base URL generally should also have an http// in front of it, or https if you have a secured SSL installed. So so this is our base URL, generally the URL that is used to open the home page or the root URL of our website. Okay, so the only thing that I want you to do right now is just place the base URL right over here. There are lots and lots of other things that we can discuss over here, but I just want you to do this much for now. Second thing that I want you to do is open your database.php, and you, in this page, actually this is, as by the name you must have understood that this is the place where we set up our database values, like our host name, our username, our password, our database, and other things. And I think we don't have to worry much about it. So our username is root, right? Our password is MySQL in case of AMPs, and if you're using WAMP or XAMPP or any other environment, your password might change as per this. So if you're using WAMP, it could be blank, or XAMPP, it could be blank, but in my case I'm using AMPs, so in my case my password is MySQL. And my database, for now I would like to create a new database for this new playlist, and I would like to name it as, let's say, CI. So I just created a new database called CI, and I want to use the database for the project. So you don't need to create table right away. So I'll just I just created a database, and I'll create tables later on. For now I'm just using the database name called CI. So this way we configured our database.php already, and I think we are ready to go for now. Okay, so we have configured our file. So basically config folder is the folder where we configure our project before we get started with it. So we have set up our base URL inside config.php, and we have set up our database values inside the indexes of DB variable. Okay, so that is it for now. Now let us just try to see how the website is working. So if I just refresh this, you can see that some page is being loaded, and I want to know how this page is being loaded. Okay, now if you see there is another file called routes over here. This is the place where we define our URL. You will notice in future that Codeigniter works in some other approach, and previously we used to browse our folders, our, let's say, project. For example, we did our PHP specials recently, and if you browse PHP special, you can see there are different URLs that at the end we have the name of the files in it, right? we also have, for example, upload.php, sorting.php, search.php. So we are browsing our project through the name of the files. And even sometimes when you have to edit something, like edit, and let's say news underscore edit .php, and we want to send our ID this way. So there are lots of things. We have .php, we have question mark to pass the query strings into the URL, which makes our URL really untidy. So instead of working this way, Codeigniter works in a segment part. For example, if you want to edit news, your URL could be something like this. So news slash you want to edit, so it can be edit. There will be no .php, there will be no question mark and ID. You can just pass it this way. So this could be one of the example of your website, I mean URL, how Codeigniter manages the URL. So this could mean you are working on news and you want to edit the news, and you want to edit the news of ID1. So this could be one of your ways to define the URL. So most of it are controlled by the routes file over here. So if you just open your routes file and move a little bit down, you can see a code over here that is saying that your default controller is welcome. Okay, so how is this being displayed over here? It is actually because of this default controller. This is saying if nothing is there in the URL, try to access the controller named welcome. So default controller, the route is actually saying us that our default controller is welcome. So what it does, we can see that there are other folders called controllers, models, views that we are really that we need to really understand. So let us just start with the controller. So it is saying that if nothing is there in the URL, then our default controller is welcome. So if you go to the controller, you can see a file called welcome.php. So what this file is actually doing, it is actually loading the view that is known as welcome message. So if you see, it is and the function is itself is explanatory, and it's saying that it wants to load the view named as welcome message. So if you go to view, you can see a file called welcome message, and this is actually the file that is being displayed in our website. So welcome to Codeigniter. The page you are looking is being generated dynamically by Codeigniter. So this is thing you can see, welcome to Codeigniter. The page you are looking is being dynamic generated by Codeigniter. So this is how actually Codeigniter works. So anything that is being displayed in the URL is actually the name of the controller, and if you go to the controller, the default function is index. So index is loading the view, and we can see that the view is here, welcome message. So welcome message is being loaded, and the content of view is then being loaded in our browser. So instead of following these self-defined controller, what we can do is we can create our own controller here. So the rule to create the controller is you need to write the controller name in uppercase. So let us say we are creating a controller called test. So I want to save it as capital T, uppercase T, and test.php. So we have created a name for the controller. The first thing you are about to do is you need to create a class of the same name. So class test extends. So you want to inherit a core controller of, there is a class of Codeigniter, which is known as CI_controller. So this is the core class that we want to extend each and every controller that we create. So I'm creating a controller called test, and it is extending CI_controller. Okay, so this is the first thing that you need to do. Now let us just create some functions. Okay, let us say function and name it like indexed, and I want to say just echo this is index page. Okay, so now in order to browse this file, or let's say controller, now how Codeigniter work is, Codeigniter actually works by the name of the controller and name of the function. So if you go here and I now want to run this controller and this function, what I will do is, first of all, I will write index.php. Okay, then give a slash and write the name of the controller, test dot and test, and I'll then give the name of the function, which is index. All right, so if you see, this is the URL structure of Codeigniter. The first thing that it does is we need to give the name of the index.php, our index file, then the name of the controller, then the name of the function. And now you can see this saying this is index page, right? So index.php, name of the controller and name of the function. As soon as we type test in here, it will search for the test controller, which it finds here, and the second segment is index.php, so it then search for the index function inside. It's not index.php, it's index, so it now search for the index function inside test. It finds it, and whatever we do inside index function, it will print it out. So and now if you just remove the index over here and hit refresh, it is still giving this is index space. Why? Because index is the function that is called by default. Okay, so if there is no name of the function given in after the name of the controller, it automatically searches for the index function. So if no function name is given after controller name, it will try to search for the index function, and if it finds it, it loads it. Let us just call another function, create another function. Let's say function, let's say from what to do. So let's see, this is function 2, fn2. I'll just echo this is fn2. Okay, now let us try to call this function. So this is inside test controller and the name of the function is fn2. So what I need to do is I need to give the name of the controller, which is test, which is already here, and the name of the function, that is fn2. So if I hit enter, now you can see this is fn2. So this is the way we actually browse URL in Codeigniter. We don't call the name of the files just like we did previously. We call the name of the controller, then the name of the function, and whatever is done inside the function, that automatically loads in the page. But we generally don't print anything inside our controller like this. We don't echo anything inside our controller. Rather, what we do is we load the view file from the controller. Now in order to load the view file, there are some set of functions that we that we'll be discussing soon, but for now what I want to do is I want to remove this index.php. So my URL should look like this. So localhost/ci, name of the controller, name of the function. This will make my URL much cleaner, right? So in order to remove that index.php from the URL, what we need to do is you need to go back to the config folder and config.php. Now you need to remove this index.php from line number 38. Config index page, you just remove the index.php. The second thing that you need to do is, since you are now trying to browse everything through URI segment, what you need to do is you need to go to your routes, into your auto load, and there is a section called auto load helper, right? And you need to load the URL helper over here. Okay, so we are loading the URL helper. Now you are ready to work with the URLs after doing this. So I will discuss more about helpers and libraries and other stuffs, but for now just load a URL helper over here. And the final thing that you want to do is you need to create an htaccess file. So htaccess file, you can just create a new file by clicking on your root file and create a new file name and name it as .htaccess, this way, and just use it. So .htaccess. Now you need to copy some code from the documentation of Codeigniter. So just say Codeigniter and htaccess. Okay, so don't open the codes from the GitHub. You can just search for the Codeigniter URL. This is from the Codeigniter documentation. So go to codeigniter.com, the one which is mentioned in the one which has codeigniter.com in it. So I'll just click on that. If you browse a little bit below, you will see this code snippet. Rewrite engine on, rewrite this. just copy this code and place it inside htaccess. So what this generally is doing, it is saying that anything that appears on the URL after the base URL, that actually means index.php slash that something. So if you noticed that actually our code is, actually our URL should look like this, right? So this is how we learned the URL of the Codeigniter. But what we want to do is we want to remove this index.php. So we need to mention in our htaccess and say that if there is something in the URL, it actually means index.php slash the controller name and the function name. But we want to remove the index.php, so we have to forcefully say in our htaccess file that this actually means index.php slash that thing. So you don't need to worry much about htaccess, just copy this snippet and paste it in htaccess. Now you can see if you refresh this, it is working without index.php. Now our URL is clean. We are ready to go by just providing the name of the controller and the name of the function, and everything is being browsable. So in next video we'll be learning about view files and how to load view through the controller, and how actually the flow Codeigniter works, how we create our different controllers, what is the use of creating different controllers, what are other facilities provided by Codeigniter. So we'll be learning slowly. So today we covered the basic setup of Codeigniter. We downloaded Codeigniter, set it up, removed the unnecessary things, we configured our config.php, we loaded our URL helper, we created our own custom controller, we created two functions and learned the way how to access those functions through URL, and we just also learned how to remove the index.php from the URL of Codeigniter. So from tomorrow we'll be doing some real coding in Codeigniter. And if you like the video, if you understood the video, don't forget to share it and click on the subscribe button if you have not subscribed it yet, and don't forget to click on the bell icon if you want to receive the notification of daily uploads. I'll see you tomorrow with the new topic. Until then, have a nice time, have a nice day. Bye.